Hi, I'm Niki, the Obsessive Bookseller. Welcome to the wrap-up video for our Genre Deep Dive Challenge. Voted on by my patrons, this is a quarterly challenge that we ended up running for actually 6 months this year. The idea was to pick a genre that we felt like we were neglecting and spend as much time on it as possible throughout the course of the challenge. I picked sci-fi, and today we're going to figure out how many books I read for the challenge and whether or not it was a good 6 months of reading. I'm going to rate everything and rank everything. First one picked for the challenge, Mercy of the Gods, book 1 in the new Captives War series by James S.A. Corey. If you're an Expanse fan, you must read this ASAP. I thought it was so good. So good! Everything they couldn't squeeze into the Expanse series, they threw into this book, and they had so much fun with it. I enjoyed the heck out of it. I was so into the story, so into the characters. I love the concept, I love the creature creation, and I cannot wait to see where things go next. Daniel Abraham is easily one of my all-time favorite writers, and I love the magic that he and Ty Frank create in their sci-fi works. So this one, dang close to a 5-star. I would say 4.5 out of 5. 1. Dark Force Rising, book 2 in the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. This is Star Wars canon as it was written back in the late 80s, early 90s. So after the initial films came out, people wanted to know where the story went, and luckily, there was literature. We could actually figure out where the story went next. How am I just now coming to appreciate this? Because I really didn't like the direction that the new Disney movies took. It didn't feel like a satisfying conclusion, and it really pisses me off that they took 30 years of lore and just said this isn't canon anymore. No, I won't stand for it. This was awesome. You'd probably have to be really into Star Wars like I am to appreciate this. I wouldn't recommend a non-Star Wars fan just kind of picking it up. If you did, it'd be like a 3-star read, whatever. This is cool, it's fine. But for me, it's like a 3-star read plus. The nostalgia factor makes me so excited to have read this, even though analyzing it by itself compared to everything else that I'm going to talk about today, probably solid 3-star. It was good. I have a placeholder here. I read Dark Side by Michael Mamet. This is the 4th book in the Planet Side series, one of my all-time favorite ongoing sci-fi series. These are so much fun. Character creation is great, fun plot, always exciting stuff. And this marks the beginning of a book 4, 5, and 6 sequence, and there's some implications here of what's to come, and I am super excited. Anytime I get to spend time with Colonel Carl Butler, I am sold. 4 stars. Next, Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Not my least favorite thing I've read from him, but not anywhere near my favorite thing that I've read from him. It took about half of the book to really get going. Totally immersive into this robot character, and I do appreciate the commitment to the vision behind it. But man, the robots talk about us being super inefficient with all of our forgetting that we assign them protocols, which give them instructions to do things more than once, but then they have to go through this back and forth protocol following thing within themselves, and it just got oh my god. It was a lot, but the magic started to kick in around the halfway point, and there was a joke, this scene that was so freaking funny right in the middle that it made the entire book worth reading for me. And I also liked where it ended in the overall vision of it. So probably still a 3-star, but for that funny scene, I think I'm going to bump it up to a 3.5. This one wasn't one of my random picks. I just read it in tandem with the challenge. Head On by John Scalzi. It's book 2 in the Lock-In series. I loved the snot out of this book. I love Scalzi's mysteries. He's not particularly sophisticated in the way he tells things, but he does the mysteries well enough that I don't question it. I don't think it's stupid. I just go along with it. And Buddy read this with a few patrons, and they agreed, the plausibility of these detectives being able to do all the things they're doing without any, upper authority, totally valid complaint. But Scalzi has a way of making you really not care about the implausibilities and just enjoy his stories. And the premise of, the head-on thing has to do with an athletic sport where these avatars get their heads pulled off and that becomes the ball for the sport. I just ate it up. I thought it was so funny. Really enjoyed this one. Solid 4 stars. And I think I liked it slightly more than Dark Side, so laying on that. Another random draw, Behind the Throne by KB Wagers. This is part of the Andranin War Chronicle, and I've mentioned it before. I thought this was going to be a gunslinger in space, Firefly type of story, but no, political intrigue, and it was passable, but it wasn't amazing. I think if you're going to have a story that's backbone is that political intrigue, it needs to be a little more complicated. I could see everything coming. It was straightforward, let's put it that way. But I did like the characters, and I especially appreciated that even from right at the very beginning, the first chapter, there's some things introduced where you kind of cringe and you're like, oh, it's going to be one of those trope stories. Then they immediately turn it on its head and provide something done slightly different than I've seen done before, which I appreciated. So this one I think is also coming in at like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Bing. Big Book, Demon in White, Book 3 in the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio. This one alone knocked me off my reading schedule for the rest of the entire challenge. Like, it took me so long to get through this book, and it was really good. I love the mix of politics, slower scenes, and huge, like, fast-moving action scenes in his books, and I love the way he plays around with pacing. So most of this book was a complete delight. I loved the crap out of it. One segment in particular is probably my favorite part of the entire series so far. But then kind of near the end, he took me on a tangent that I don't think I was ready for, and I also didn't feel like it had a lot of meaning in the series as a whole. And this is the first time I started questioning the author's writing, which is not a good thing, but I was hoping he would pull it back in the next book. Struggling. Which he kind of did, but yeah, this one I think I gave the first two 4.5 out of 5 stars, and so I don't think this one was quite as strong as that one. So I don't know, I'm not doing 4.25, but it's an upper 4. Not quite as good as Mercy of the Gods, but better than everything else I'd read so far. Cage of Souls by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I love the cover on this one. I love world building in books. I love creature creation and nature settings. I eat that stuff up. The flora and fauna sells me every time. And I was hoping that the book would have something to do with the cover, and it totally does. The atmosphere you get in this story, this is what you're signing up for. It is so good. And I thought the story was particularly interesting. There's a budding theme I'm picking up on all of Tchaikovsky's works, especially the 2 that I read for this challenge. And so far, this is one of my favorite books from him as far as like total immersion goes. I felt really connected to the story and the journey we were on. The only thing that took it down a little bit in my esteem is like it was really begging for a punchline, like a solid slam dunk of an ending. And it got one. It just felt like an ending to a different story. Like it didn't slam dunk what had been built up to that point for me. It felt like a different story. It was odd. And I'm not sure I'll ever recover from the image of the dangling eyeballs. That's all I'm saying. 4 out of 5 stars, maybe a little higher. I definitely liked it better than the Scalzi, but I think I still enjoyed Demon in White just a bit more. Capping out the Thrawn trilogy and solidifying my decision to continue exploring the Star Wars universe, The Last Command. This was great. I didn't like it quite as much as book 2, so for that reason I'm going to knock it down a little bit in the rating. And this female character that's on the front cover, like, I thought she was a brat. Just throwing snark every chance she got, and everybody else was uncommonly kind to her despite that, and it made the story feel a little bit plausible. Like, you can't shoot venom at people and have them react this way, but, you know, the classic Star Wars characters are paragons of patience, apparently. So, that one gets knocked down just a little bit. I don't usually get annoyed at characters, but there it is. Oh, hey! Unexploded Remnants by Elaine Gallagher. This is a standalone, at least at this point, novella. It's published by Tor.com. I was immediately drawn to the cover. I thought it was very enticing. The novella was good. I tend to have a struggle with shorter stories because I feel like by the time I get invested, they're over. And this one, like, by the time things got super interesting and I wanted to know more, it ended. And it wasn't a novella like Piranesi or Emperor's Soul, where you felt really, man, I can't believe I read that. That was so good. This was just like a fun little snack of a novella. 2.5 out of 5 stars? I would definitely read more from the author because the concepts were cool, but I felt like, man, just didn't go anywhere. That'll work. So, that one's currently at the bottom. Shadow Puppets by Orson Scott Card. At this point, I'm evaluating the series as a whole and how this book plays into that, rather than more honestly on the individual merits of this specific book, because it was kind of a filler book. It was a bridge from book 2 to the final book in this shadow sequence. And the only thing it had going for it was progressing the plot a little bit in ways I liked, and then one of the best back and forth dialogue scenes I've read in a while. Really cool. As excited as I am for this series as a whole, I think this book is probably just like a 3-star read. Where did I like it in relation to all of these? Probably right there. The Martian by Andy Weir. You ever hear people talk about a book for so long that you just like actively don't want to read it? I resisted for such a long time. I also didn't think the storyline sang to me too much because it's like real world Mars. It's not like sci-fi Mars where there's like aliens or whatever. It's plausible that something like this could actually happen within the next couple of generations. And I tend to like a little more escapism when I read. However, like, this book knocked my socks off. It was so much fun. It had a perfect balance of the science-y stuff with a lot of really cool problem solving, the human aspect and the connection and the empathy that these characters feel for one another, and the humor. This was one of the funniest books that I've read in a long time. Like, Buddy read this with my patrons, and it was just a constant thing of like, did you get to this chapter where he said this? It was so funny. Books with humor in it always bump themselves up in my esteem a little bit more than one without. And I knew I was probably going to like the book, but I didn't think I'd like it nearly as much as I actually did. So let's say a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so this is the problem with reading too many things at once, because I've read like 2 books beyond this book, and I can't actually remember everything about what happened in it. So it's one of those memory jogging things. Like, did I like what little I can remember of that book more than I like this one, which I can remember vividly? And actually that's probably the determining factor. This one kind of blended in with the series as a whole, even though it had one of my favorite scenes in the series. Whereas things in this book I'll remember for a really long time. So 4.5 out of 5 stars, it's getting bumped into second place. Against Mercy of Gods, there's no contest. Haha, speaking of, Kingdom of Death, book 4 in the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio. Now, this was my least favorite Christopher Rocchio book to date. The pacing, man. We've went way too long on the same thing. And part of me thinks that was a deliberate thing to really set the stage. Like, that experience will then shape the entire rest of the series. If that's the case and it was intentional, I get it. This is probably just a personal problem. But I felt like I was reading the exact same thing for like 2 weeks straight. And then the end happens, and everybody was telling me, oh, you gotta get to the end. It's so amazing. You won't have those same feelings when you finish it. I still kind of do, but at the same time, like, talk about mic drops. What is it about these Sun Eater books that I cannot? There we go. Forgot what I was saying. Oh, mic drop. Okay. He wasn't afraid to just go for it. And I think the discovery process, the fact that this author surprises me on so many accounts, is one of the reasons why I'm still with him at this point in the series. I'm not sure I like the direction of the story. I'm not sure I like what he's done with this conflict. But I do trust in the process still, and I think wherever he's taking it, it's going to have a good impact. So this book as a whole, probably a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I more than just liked it, but I didn't like really like it. That's about right. I read Red Shirts with My Patrons by John Scalzi. And I mean, I'm just committed to reading as many Scalzi things as possible because I love the writing. He's got feel-good sci-fi stories that are always guaranteed to be a bit of fun. This one was a bit of fun, but oh man, I'm not a Trek person. Mostly because I've never made the time and I'm a completionist. I would have to go back to the very beginning and watch the whole thing. But I haven't made time for that. So the only thing I've watched are like the new Chris Pine movies, which, by the way, does Benedict Cumberbatch freak anybody else out in those as much as he does me. Holy crap. I was hoping that even though I'm not a huge Trek fan, this would still draw me in and make it feel highly engaging and give me something of substance, which it's a Scalzi. I don't know why I was looking for substance, but he's done it here and there on occasion. And I can say with confidence that this book was incredibly clever. I'm sure they were poking fun at a lot of things about the actual Star Trek show that fans will pick up on and geek out about, but there was really nothing left. Clever wasn't enough to keep me engaged in the plot. I thought a couple things were actively stupid. I thought a couple things were kind of funny. And the end of it, it was weird. This isn't really a spoiler, but the book ends, and then there's like a couple of chapter things after that, I mean, it was almost like he wrote short stories and didn't know what to do with them and needed to get the word count up so that he could have a full novel for Red Shirts, so he just threw them in at the end. It was really bizarre. Though, I mean, this is one that I'd had in my Audible library for a long time. I'm glad I finally picked it up, read it, checked it off the list, but as Scalzi things go, yeah, I wish I had skipped it. Did I like it better than Unexploded Remnants? No, I don't. I think that one with the uniqueness factor win it over just slightly, but it's like nose hairs. Need a better method. Okay. Ta-da! And finally, Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. Book 4 of the Secret Projects, which aren't tied together by any means. I was underwhelmed by this book. I had a really hard time even getting invested in it. I do love the world building. I think everything he does is always so cool, and it's something I've not ever seen before. The magic system was pretty cool. I liked the main character in the sense that I felt like it was a really good exploration of character. And I appreciate that having him stick to those basic essence that makes him him actually made the story a little bit weaker, because it would have been a better story had he kind of changed his behavior based on like everything around him. That's really vague, but it was meant to be. And while I think this one is a really good advancing point for the Cosmere story as a whole, as a book by itself, I found it a bit underwhelming. I was a little bored during parts of it. I was not invested in any of the other characters, and I don't believe Sanderson was particularly invested in any of the other characters, just the main guy. And just putting it out there, I would suggest not reading this one at all unless you don't mind some Stormlight Archive spoilers, at least through Rhythm of War. So I think, I mean, even Sanderson that I'm a little underwhelmed by is still a 3-star read. So that's where I'm at with it. And that puts it, any other card book that I've read probably would have been up higher in the lineup. But I think this is going, That one really good dialogue scene in this one saved it, because that's something that I find memorable, whereas not very many things in this one, except for maybe like the last few chapters, were memorable to me. There you have it, 15 books read for the challenge in 16 months. That's not only that, my initial commitment was like 11 or 12, so I would call this a challenge success. My least favorite being Red Shirts, my highest favorite, one of my favorite books I've read, Mercy of Gods, and kind of some lower ratings on these, but still positive emotions from them. I didn't read a ton of duds. And the beauty of it, at least half of these I wouldn't have gotten around to for a really long time. So it makes me happy that the challenge is serving its function of making me pick up books sooner than I would have otherwise. And there you have it. If you've read any of these, let me know what your favorites are from this lineup, and any other sci-fi book that I should continue if I were to do this project again. And before I go, I want to announce the new challenge that my patrons voted on. It will be the Incomplete Series Challenge. It's one we've run before, but it's still one of my all-time favorites. Who doesn't have a ton of outstanding series that they're trying to get through? I have a ridiculous number, and it's great. I would love to run this challenge at least once a year to help me kind of thin the herd a little bit. So my next challenge video will be the intro to the Incomplete Series Challenge, and you will see all the stats and all the books that I'm hoping to get through. It's going to be a lot of fun. You've heard it a lot, and if you're watching the wrap-up video, chances are you've followed my journey through this challenge over the last 6 months. But my patrons vote on and get access to this challenge series a full quarter ahead of time. So they get to participate alongside me as we do the challenge, and then it airs on the main channel after that while we have then moved on to the next one. So if you want to get in on the action in real time, link to my Patreon is in the description. Otherwise, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much to those of you who have been supporting me for a long time now. I really appreciate it. And I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye.